Story time with Stephanie Storey.
I'm art historical novelist Stephanie Storey. Welcome to my show, Story Time. My guest today, I'm looking forward to this conversation because there's very specific things I want to ask him about. He is an actor and a writer and an acting coach at Actors Workout Studio in North Hollywood. During the pandemic, he launched a web series called 4 Peas in a Pod, wrote it for himself to star in. We will talk about it. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show, Rickie Peete.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, okay. So what I specifically want to talk to you about, before we talk about the web series in particular, what is it about the job of being an actor and the craft of being an actor that you personally can't give up? What is it specifically that you got hooked into that you can't let go of as an artistic craft?
I feel like you're setting me up for you.
No,
like,
I'm not.
No, but it feels like you're throwing me this softball because I can easily knock this out of the park.
Well, good. No, I'm genuinely curious. Because before I started, I don't think I would have had any idea what would have attracted someone to the craft of acting other than standing in front of a camera and being famous. Like, that's what I thought it was. And I think a lot of people at home think that, and that's not true. So that's why I'm giving you that question.
Mm-hmm. It's the ability, it's the opportunity to live truthfully. It's the opportunity to investigate yourself and to explore yourself and to express every light and dark area of who you are as a human being, and to do it unapologetically. That's what I love about it, right? In this art form, I can be me, and that's the asset. Me. I'm the asset, right? I can't be the next guy, and the next guy can't be me. And so when I walk into a room, I'm representing me. I'm representing all my experiences. I'm representing all my relationships. I'm representing my imagination, because where does my imagination come from? It comes from me, right? And that's what I get to bring to my artistry and express myself from there. So there's nothing that I know of. Now, I have an MBA. So before this, the acting thing, you know, I went to business school, I went into corporate America, I did the IT consulting thing, yada, yada, yada. It was cool. It really wasn't cool. But, you know, I did it. So I do have something to compare this to. And this is what makes me feel alive. You know what I mean?
It's been interesting as I've learned about what actors really were, because when I was growing up, I thought acting was just putting on a show. It was so much more like representational or presentational than it's about sort of expressing what you have going on inside. And so that's been interesting for me as a writer, to take some of those tools that I've learned from acting and give myself a stronger point of view and give myself sort of a stronger ability to sneak inside the skin of my characters and then represent them on the page. I have been thinking a lot about, as I've been shooting the show, I've mainly been talking to authors, but I've been thinking about how much bigger the writing and storytelling world is than just people who have gone out and published books. And as you know, I started studying acting a few years ago at the acting studio where you teach. And I was thinking about how before I started studying acting to me, no offense to you and every other actor, felt like actors were pawns for writers to move around on the stage. Now, I know that's not true anymore, really, but it partially is. Can you talk to me about what the storytelling role and process is for actors? That's a big question to start, but what are your general thoughts about how actors go about what their role is in storytelling in TV and film?
Okay, so let me kind of trudge through this. All of this is going to come off the top of my head. So a lot of times you hear actors speak about, you know, I'm a storyteller, I love telling stories, right? But as an actor and a writer and a director, I realized that, you know, the actor's not telling the story. The actor is a part of the story, right? It's up for the director to come in with their vision of the written word, the writer who's created the world, so they're telling the story, right? The actor is playing a part within that. The actor may play a part in telling the character story, I guess, but I think that's the closest they'll get to it. Obviously, the actors are extremely important because you can have a great laid out story, but you have characters that don't come to life because the performances suck, then it's not going to translate like it should.
You started out, now, Rickie, I'm going to make a presumption. Did you start out as an actor, I presume, and then you moved into writing, or was it the other way around?
Right, so acting first.
Okay.
So yeah, acting first. I took my first acting class my senior year at the University of Virginia. And at that time I wanted to be, I was a college football player, a track athlete, scholarship. And I had this idea of being like the Black Schwarzenegger after I graduated. So, so I'd look at movies, et cetera, and say, well, I can do that just as well as he can do that.
Well, sure.
So I started taking more theater classes at University of Virginia. Once I left there, I did community theater. Then I went to Washington, D.C. and studied a lot in all the different studios there. Eventually opened my own acting studio before I came here to LA.
As you sort of move from acting, you decide to write some of your own stuff. You've written shorts, short films. You've written now this web series, which we'll talk about because you put it out during the pandemic or started it during the pandemic. And we've talked about you writing other projects. What made you start to think about moving toward writing? Was it to give yourself an outlet to write something for you to star in, or was it just a different way of expressing yourself? What made you move toward writing?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a different way of expressing myself, right? So as an actor, I'm in charge, for lack of a better way of stating, I'm in charge of this one character, right?
Yeah.
But as a writer, I'm God, right? I create the world. I'm responsible for everything within this world, and just my personality. I can't say anything other than it's my personality to see something and have it speak to me and me want to express it. So it's not like I went looking for acting, writing, directing, any of it, teaching, any of it. It's just something that I felt that I had an affinity for, and it would be a disservice to myself and to I hate to say the world, but to the world if I didn't live that out.
As far as your writing process goes, you're writing for, like, let's take the 4 Peas in a Pod. You did this web series, which you put out during the pandemic, which, first of all, I presume you did it because you play all 4 characters. So it's a great acting role for you to be able to sink into different things and play different jokes and play different sides. So, and production has shut down in LA so much, and it's so hard to get work and to keep yourself going. So I presume that was a part of why you did this. But when you sit down to write it, do you use acting craft knowledge in order to write it, or is it a different part of your brain?
I don't think it's a different part of my brain. There are obviously, not obviously, but I say obviously because you understand this because you're a great actress. There are a lot of similarities between the two art forms, right? I think that, well, one is that, it's great to have some perspective, some point of view, something that you feel you need to express, right? The imagination is so key, especially in writing, creating the different worlds that you're bringing. So the similarities are, hopefully both the writer and the actor are experts in relationships, right? The actor has to be an expert in a relationship with his character and the other characters and the location and circumstances, etc., right? And that goes back to the actor being the storyteller, right? She is the expert and responsible for that character. The writer should be an expert for all the relationships within the story, right? Within the world, within the time period, everything, right? So that's one thing, that's one similarity. But as an artist, I think both the writer and the actor needs to be open to inspiration, right? Because inspiration comes to us, right? If I were to use an analogy or metaphor, you're better with which one that would be, but I'll say it anyway. It's like being set to a radio station, and the universal radio is always playing something. It's always playing something, and as long as you're tuned to the right station, you're gonna get what you need, and that's the inspiration that will come to you as an artist, and that's a part of your artistic voice. That's a part of your imagination, your instinct, your intuition, et cetera, et cetera. I forget the question you had asked me.
Are there challenges in writing for yourself? Because sometimes I can imagine writing for somebody else, and then I pass it to an actor, and that actor makes choices that I didn't necessarily expect an actor to make, which is great. It adds this different layer to what you've written. When you write for yourself, it always makes me nervous that I'm just gonna make the same choices, and it does get hard to get out of yourself, I guess, after you've written something. Are there challenges for writing for yourself?
Yeah, I would say so. Not for me, because although I'm right, as you said, I wrote these characters so that I could play the parts. Yeah. But I'm not writing necessarily for me. I'm focused on the character, right? I'm focused on bringing these characters to life in this world and the circumstances, and then I'll come in later and play the part as the actor. But when I'm writing, I'm not focused on that. That's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I'd be doing the characters a disservice if I'm thinking as the actor. You know what I mean? If I'm coming in with these ideas of what I want to do, how I want to look cool, the words that I want to say, I'm going to block all that inspiration that I've just been spending, last few minutes telling you about, because I'm coming into it with something versus being open to hearing these characters speak and interact with one another.
So you change. So then when writer you gives actor you the script, can you divorce yourself from that writing process and come to it with a fresh perspective?
Yeah. Because so the writer me, again, when I'm listening and I'm open to inspiration, things will come to me. Dialogue will come to me, and I may laugh hard, and I may say, "God, what the fuck?" And I know that, I need to write that down. Again, me as the writer, I didn't come into it with that. It just came to me. So when the writer hands it off to the actor, I hate talking like this, but I guess this is the case. When the writer hands it off to the actor, I'm going to take it and I'm going to look at it with fresh eyes to a certain extent. And I'm more focused on the performance at that point. As a writer, I'm not focused on the actor's performance. I'm focused on the truth of these characters.
Okay, explain to my viewers at home, because most of the people who watch this are writer types. They are like novelty, booky types. Explain the difference between writing that character and then focusing on the performance. Because I don't think, it's weird, even though as novelists, we inhabit other people and we take those people on and we put those people, we put those clothing on in order to inhabit in them and write them. I don't think most writers who I've talked to, I certainly was not one of them before I started studying this stuff, who understood what that performance actually, what that difference was between writing the dialogue of that character and writing what their actions are and what it means to embody that person and express that moment out on, like when you're sitting down and writing and you're not thinking of it as a performer, what does that difference look like to you between writer and performer self? What does the performer look like that's different from the writer self?
Well, as a writer, you know, I'm a plotter, right?
Right.
I'm
Okay.
a plotter.
Mhm.
I'm very, I'm not a pantser.
Yeah.
So,
So hold on. So the people at home, the few people at home who don't know, plotters plan out all of their plot and all the structure and all the things that are going to happen. And pantsers sit down. I don't understand them. They just start writing things. I don't get it. Those of us like Rickie and I, we plan our plots out before we start writing. Go ahead.
And I was thinking about pantser, if that came about because, you know, they fly by the seat of their pants, right? Is that correct? Got that right. And I preach structure. I preach structure. I think, you know, so I'm wearing a shirt, right? The world recognizes this as a shirt because it has a collar and it has sleeves, etc., and it fits me in a certain way. I think the same thing applies to a story. There are different types of shirts, right? They're all kind of different fabric, materials, etc., but we still recognize it as a shirt. And the same thing applies to a story, right? So I can sit down and write to my heart's desire, but if it's not in a certain, there are laws. I think there are certain laws, right? And if what I've done does not fit within that structure, then it's not going to really be what I wanted it to be, right? It's not going to resonate the way it should resonate. Mm-hmm. So again, I lost my thought. What were we talking about?
Well, I actually loved that thought. But what I was wondering about is taking that kind of thought process and saying, okay, but what does it then mean to switch over and be the performer? Like, you've got the writing and the structure down, you've gotten the characters down, you've imagined the dialogue, you've written them down. What does it mean to flip that switch and focus on the performance? Yeah.
So I have now. So quickly going back to the writer, right? So what I was saying as far as the structure and stuff, I know going into a scene, and I'm speaking, I assume a lot of your audience are authors writing novels, etc. Yeah. I write screenplays, right?
Of course.
So I go into a scene and I'm thinking about the structure of the scene. I'm thinking about the conflict within that scene. I'm thinking about where my character starts at and where he ends or she ends, right? So I'm thinking about that kind of stuff. So I'm not just thinking about one character. I'm thinking about this micro world that they're in right now. So, and I'm not thinking about the performance of it. I'm thinking about how they're interacting within that. And then as the actor, I'm coming in and I'm looking at some of the same pointers that the writer has given me, right? If it's written well, I can kind of map out the conflict between myself and the other character. But, you know, and then as a performance-wise, you know, I'm trying to bring as much emotion to this character as possible. And again, that's another similarity between a writer and an actor, right? This is all about emotion, right? That's why people read. That's why people go to plays. That's why people go to the theater, right? They're going for some type of emotional hit, right? Be it a love story, a thriller, whatever it is. That's why they pay attention. So from an actor's standpoint, I'm looking at this character and I'm putting myself in this character's place, and I'm looking at trying to mine as much emotion out of this character as possible. And I'm thinking about being interesting. I'm thinking about being interesting as a performer, because again, people don't go to a performance to see real life, because real life is boring. You know, you watch a scene in a restaurant between two people over dinner, that will keep your attention because a writer has written this scene in such a way that it is enthralling. It keeps our attention. You go to your restaurant in real life, you sit down, you watch two people having dinner, you're like, nobody's paying for that, right? Nobody's paying for that.
Yep. I have to ask, because you wrote your web series during the pandemic, and I also know, because I am a student at the acting studio where you teach, that the acting studio has moved to online classes during the pandemic. I also saw you, which I found fascinating, you were coaching somebody on a monologue on Instagram Live. which I found to be one of the most fascinating things on the planet, Rickie, and I don't know why. I just thought it was fascinating that you were actually coaching somebody on Instagram Live. It was just mind-blowing. So all of those facts in place, how is the pandemic affecting your creativity and what you're doing and how you're dealing with an art that is, acting is performance-based? You got to have a place to go do it. You have to go have a place to express it when theaters are closed down and movie theaters are closed down and productions closed down. How are you dealing with it, even though knowing you are doing all these external things?
Cool. This pandemic is, obviously it's trying for a lot of people, including myself, but I try to focus on the positive. I try to focus on, going forward. So from that perspective, it's given me a lot of opportunities to really focus on what I need to be doing. And I think Nina Simone, she's a great, she's passed, a great singer, extremely talented, classical, jazz, et cetera, et cetera. There's a great Netflix documentary about her life, but she was very engaged in politics, et cetera. And she was having an interview and she was saying how she feels, or she felt that an actor's responsibility is to be connected to the times, right? To be connected to what's going on in the world and to express themselves, kind of through that dynamic, right? So, and she can't imagine that, things would be, and she was talking during the 60s, right? During the civil rights era. She can't imagine an actor not representing the time. She can't imagine going back and listening to an actor's work and not understanding what was going on around the artist, and not understanding what was going on in the artist's time. That seemed to be like a waste of their gifts, if they're not representing that. So for me, going back to my webisode, I think I kind of spoke to what's going on within this present time, and I'm still writing, so I'll speak to it even more. And you asked about, why writing? Acting gives me, I gave you that big explanation about why I love acting. Well, writing also gives me a bigger brush, a bigger canvas to express myself, right? Through multiple characters, through different storylines, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'm passionate about equal rights. I'm passionate about civil rights. I'm passionate about the underdog. I'm passionate about oppression, and I'm a Black man in America, so all of that stuff. So writing gives me an opportunity to express myself in all of those different ways, and to not necessarily be heard, but to be heard by the universe, not necessarily by people. You know what I'm saying? It's like me being a flower, trying to come out of the soil, and something is just keeping me down, or I may be keeping myself down, so I never get an opportunity to spread my limbs out, right? So writing gives me that opportunity to, you know what I mean? Even though there may be like 10 viewers watching that, but I've done that, right? So, because there could be 200 people watching, 200,000 people watching, and I'm like this, and I haven't really, so what difference does that make?
Okay, Rickie, so one last question. We are taping this on the day that John Lewis passed away. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about being a Black man in America, and we're watching all of this renewed, I guess I would call it renewed energy behind the Black Lives Matter movement since the death of George Floyd. That I am hopeful that it's all going to actually make more changes than we have seen in the past when we've had these bursts of energy that have sort of come to nothing on this racial front. What can artists do? I've not asked this question of anybody, but what can artists do specifically, since you were talking about, you felt like it was your responsibility to express the moment? what can people as artists do to help keep the momentum going or help push this moment toward hopefully more actual systemic change?
Yeah, I'd say to be artists, and that's more. It's more simple than it is easy, but to be artists and to use your voice, within your art form, right? So I know it's difficult for a lot of people to seemingly kind of step out of their lane to do these other things, to be more political, etc. But I'd say stay in your lane, but allow yourself to utilize your artistry in a different way. So you don't have to, as an artist, you don't have to get in front of a podium and give speeches like Jesse Jackson, but Jesse Jackson can't do what you can do, right? And because I think about this all the time. I think about great rappers or whomever. What if they actually utilize their voice and their talent to create messages just about voting? You're being a citizen and voting. It doesn't sound sexy, but that's why you're an artist. That's what your job is, to make it sound sexy, to make people think, be engaged. You know what I mean? That's the artist's responsibility, to translate the human condition in a way that people get it. You know what I'm saying? It's a picture is worth 1,000 words, because that's what great art does to us. It speaks to us in a different way. So I'd say, as an artist, take the responsibility, take the mantle, and utilize your God-given gifts and creativity to express yourselves in a way that affects the masses, or whatever your tribe is, the tens, whatever it is. Do what you can do, because if everybody does what they can do from where they stand in their power, as you said, yeah, things will change.
Rickie, I love you. You're so fantastic. This is why people have to come take classes from you, because your passion is so absorbing and is so contagious.
Thank you. I appreciate that coming from you, because I admire you to no ends, because I think that you have, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on your show. I've always thought this. You have such a great actress instrument. I've watched you in the past, obviously. I've watched you on stage, and you're one of the few people, I'm just being true, you're one of the few people that I've said, ooh, I'd like to work with her. I want to work with her. Either as another actor or directing, right? So for people out there who may not understand what I'm saying, it's kind of like, a musician watching somebody up on stage just riffing, and them saying, oh, I like to get up there and play off of this person, because that's what I get when I'm watching you act.
Oh,
you're emotional.
No, you're amazing. This is a mutual admiration society, because I think you are amazing actor, and I love everything you do. I love it every time I see you, and I'm serious. Your passion is just through the roof. So I'm a longtime fan. I'll be a fan of yours forever, and I will be watching to see what new things you put out in the world.
Story time with Stephanie Storey. Story time virtually. We've got time and plenty of stories, talking stories in a novel way. Story time with Stephanie Storey.